Okay, nice to start with a cough. Alright, so here's where we ended on the last PowerPoint. Keep in mind that for depression, the primary chemical cause is reduced serotonin, and for norepinephrine, we have an increase in mania. I already went through this, and I'm going to move on to social cognitive factors in mood disorders. First of all, an external locus of control and learned helplessness. If you think back to our personality unit last week, we talked about how the external locus of control from the character Neil in Dead Poet Society probably led to a sense of learned helplessness, where he felt that he had no control of his situation. This is a common feeling in depression, where one feels that they have no control over their lives, they can't make their situation better, and whether or not this is true, it is something that is widely believed. Oftentimes mood disorders, especially major depression and dysthymic disorder, are preceded by stressful events related to work, marriage, and family. All of these things, a loss of a job, a change in a marital status, or other family difficulties, will be precipitators for the onset of depression. Another really, really important explanation for depression is what we call attributions. How do we explain events? Now, if we look at something like, I got fired from my job, this has happened to many people. Many people my age have lost their jobs. As we know, Target had a major layoff in recent months. My husband got laid off from IBM. One way that we could attribute these events that are negative in our lives are, first of all, stable. I'll never get another job. Global. I mess up everything. And internal. It was all my fault. I'm worthless. This type of attributional thinking is likely to lead to depression. Now, there is a healthier way of attributing events. First of all, to make them temporary. To say, you know what? I lost my job now, but I will get another job. I have skills that will help me in the future. Be specific. I don't mess up everything. Maybe there were things about this job that I didn't do well, or maybe even it was just a global market economy that caused me to lose my job. This was the case with my husband, where everyone who had his specific job title lost their jobs. It didn't really have to do with his performance. It had to do with the downsizing of the company. And external, it's not all your fault. Now, not that you should never take responsibility for your own actions or understand that you might have contributed some way, but nevertheless, acknowledge the fact that certain things that happen are beyond your control, and they were not internal, they were not all your fault, and they don't indicate that you're worthless. And these kinds of attributions lead to successful coping. Let's look at another example. Depression and negative explanatory style. My boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with me. We could say it's stable. Oh my gosh, I'll never have a relationship again. Now, I remember feeling this way after breakups in high school and even in college, but the reality is that you will. And that with every relationship you learn something. Global, you could say, I mess up everything. You could take the responsibility on yourself. But in reality, a relationship is a two-way street. And you could take it internally and say, it was all my fault. I'm worthless. Now, again, this is not good thinking. It's not correct attributional thinking, because in a relationship, it's always a two-way street. So temporary thinking would say, hey, it's difficult now, but I'm going to get through this. Specific. Okay, so this didn't work out, but I learned something about myself and relationships. I'm actually really thankful for the relationships I had before I met my husband, because they helped me to learn something about myself and about what I needed in a relationship. And external, while maybe there were things I did wrong in the relationship, it is a two-way street, and it's not all my fault. So these are both healthy and successful coping styles in explanation. Now, depression and mood disorders, and here we're talking more about dysthymic or major depressive disorders, can be kind of a cyclical, vicious cycle. You have the stressful event that occurs. Maybe it's the loss of a relationship. Maybe it's a divorce in the family. Or maybe it's a job loss. You come up with a negative explanation for it that is self-defeating, This leads to a depressed mood, and this will lead to cognitive and behavioral changes. This cycle continues so that it may lead to even more stressful events and more negative explanations even in the future. So what do we do to break this cycle? First of all, it's important to keep in mind that spontaneous remission occurs with most mood disorders. They do end without treatment. We go through difficult times in our life and we get through them. But sometimes we need more than just time to pass. We need treatment that involves psychotherapy and biological treatment. This is where your psychotherapy assignment will be really important to complete, because there are different forms of psychotherapy that will look at the root causes of the treatment, and some will be cognitive therapy, which will challenge your thinking style, your attributional style in particular. So reattributing the blame to the situation, not to yourself. There will be psychoanalytic or insight therapy. This will help you to really understand why it is that maybe you feel the way that you do. Insight therapy, it means you gain an insight into why you think the way that you do. This might involve delving back into your history as a child and trying to understand the patterns of thinking that were ingrained in you as a young child. But they also give you tools for coping with here and now. So changing the way you think about your situation and gaining insight into your situation. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy is really considered to be the premier therapy for mood disorder. First of all, you take a look at your thoughts, your negative thoughts. Oftentimes, you think of something like, there's no point even trying anymore. Let's say that you've had a number of unsuccessful attempts at relationships, and you give up trying. This will lead to a negative mood, which we call a flow. A positive flow, it means that we see things in a positive way, but a negative flow means that we feel guilty or discouraged, inadequate, and worthless. In many people that I've known that have had depression, this is the pattern of thinking that they get into with their mood. And then their behavior becomes reduced. They become less active. They avoid people and situations. The goal of cognitive behavioral therapy is to break the cycle. We break it here, maybe we break it here, or maybe we break it here. So we might break it by saying, okay, let's reattribute our thoughts. Let's think about our thoughts in a more positive way. Or maybe we'll break it here and we'll say, let's change our behaviors. Let's become more active. We know that activity increases the quality of life for people. It releases endorphins and it makes us feel better. So the goal of cognitive behavioral therapy then is to interrupt this negative flow, and somewhere in this cycle to say, okay, we're going to stop this downward cycle that just keeps sucking us into depression, and to help us to feel better. So CBT aims to break the cycle at one or more of these points, and even a modest program of exercise, for example, over here, can be therapeutic because it interrupts the actions or the behavior part of the cycle. Now, finally, we're going to end with biological treatments. These are numerous. First of all, antidepressants are very effective for the most part. They do take 4 to 6 weeks to work, and they will work in the part of the brain that produces serotonin. Lithium is a very popular treatment for bipolar disorder. Now, it comes in a number of trade names, but it does ease the symptoms of bipolar disorder. Now, deep brain stimulation is an interesting an upcoming form of biological treatment in which a little transmitter device is implanted under the clavicle, right under the shoulder bone, and a wire is actually transmitted up through the brain, and a feathered type of device goes into the area of the brain that produces dopamine, and it helps ease depression through deep brain stimulation. Transcranial magnetic stimulation is another promising form of biological treatment in which magnetic stimulators are passed across the head. There's a little bit of about it in your textbook, and what this does is it stimulates the deeper parts of the brain to release serotonin and other chemicals that will reduce depression. And finally, we have the most extreme form of therapy called electroconvulsive shock therapy, and you can see a diagram of it here right below. Now, this form of therapy is used for extreme cases that do not respond to other forms of treatment. It was actually discovered by a physician who had a patient who actually had a grand mal seizure. After he had his grand mal seizure, he noticed that his symptoms of depression had disappeared, and so he came to the conclusion that perhaps that inducing a form of a seizure might ameliorate the symptoms of depression. Now, the primary side effect of this is memory loss for the period of time in which before and after the treatment is completed. However, for people with very extreme forms of depression, this is oftentimes the final solution, and it actually really can help people who are extremely depressed, and it can help ease their depression. I have seen videos. I have known my own great aunt had this treatment, and it did help her tremendously with depression. So the bottom line is that there are numerous forms of treatment for depression, including psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and biological treatments. And as you read about and think about therapy, keep in mind, people do not have to suffer with these disorders. Sometimes it can take a while to really, truly figure out and understand what the best form of treatment is. But I want you to know that there are really hopeful and valuable treatments for depression, and that you can conquer this sometimes debilitating illness. Thank you so much for listening to these screencasts today. I really look forward to being back in class as soon as possible. Thank you.